Welcome back to Royal Vault UK, where we uncover the hidden stories, heartbreaks, and untold legacies of the British royal family. There are moments in history when a single life becomes larger than the crown itself. For Princess Diana, that life, filled with grace, defiance, and pain, became a mirror reflecting both the beauty and the fragility of royalty. Today, we revisit the final days of the princess, the world called the People's Princess Days, marked not only by tragedy, but by a quiet, desperate search for freedom. Behind the flashing cameras and the whispers of scandal, Diana was fighting for something far greater than fame. She was fighting for peace, for love, and for her own voice in a world that tried to silence it. But within the gilded walls of Kensington Palace, her independence came at a cost that even she could not have foreseen. By the mid-1990s, Princess Diana was no longer just a member of the British royal family. She had become something else entirely. To millions, she was a symbol of compassion and truth. To the establishment, she was an unpredictable force beloved by the world, yet quietly feared within the palace walls. After her separation from Prince Charles, Diana began to redefine what it meant to be royal. She stepped away from rigid traditions and the suffocating expectations that once dictated every moment of her life. Her public appearances became fewer, but more powerful. A single visit to a hospital, a touch of a patient's hand, or a quiet conversation with someone suffering from AIDS spoke louder than any speech ever could. Behind the grandeur of Kensington Palace, however, Diana's life was marked by solitude. Friends would later recall that even amid her fame, she often walked the palace halls alone, haunted by memories, pursued by the relentless press, and searching for peace in a world that refused to let her rest. The divorce, finalized in 1996, seemed like liberation on the surface. But for Diana, freedom came with a heavy price: isolation, mistrust, and a haunting awareness that she could never truly escape the shadow of the crown. It was during this fragile chapter of her life that she found herself drawn toward a man named Dodi Fayed, a figure who offered warmth, spontaneity, and a sense of normality that royalty had never allowed her. But while the world saw romance, behind the scenes, forces far more complex were already in motion, forces that would soon shape the final hours of her life. In the final weeks of 1997, Princess Diana seemed, at last, to be at peace. Photographs showed her smiling beneath the Mediterranean sun, radiant, carefree, almost reborn. But behind those sunlit moments was a quiet tension, the kind that only those closest to her could sense. Reports suggest that Diana had confided to friends her desire to step away from royal expectations forever. She wanted to dedicate herself to humanitarian work, to use her voice, not her title. Yet whispers within the palace and the press painted her newfound freedom as rebellion. When she accepted the invitation from Dodi Fayed to join him on his family's yacht that summer, it was meant to be a brief escape. The sea, the sun, the laughter. For once, the cameras seemed distant. But the photographs that would follow from that trip, showing the princess in private, moments of affection, sent shockwaves through Britain's most powerful circles. According to palace insiders, those images reignited old anxieties about Diana's influence and her potential to reshape the monarchy's public image. She was no longer the shy young bride of the 80s. She had become a woman entirely her own. On the evening of August 31st, 1997, Diana and Dodi left the Ritz Hotel in Paris. The world would remember what happened next as one of the darkest nights in modern royal history. As their car sped through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, chased by flashes of light from the relentless paparazzi, the story that had once captured hearts became a tragedy that silenced them. Moments later, the tunnel fell quiet. The car was crushed. The light that had once illuminated the monarchy's most human face was gone. Emergency responders fought to save her, the people's princess who had given love where others gave protocol. But fate, that cruel companion of royalty, would not yield. When the news broke, Britain awoke to disbelief. Crowds gathered outside Kensington Palace, carrying flowers, tears, and silence. The nation mourned not only a princess, but the idea of what she represented: empathy, freedom, and the courage to feel. Inside the palace, however, emotions were not as easily displayed. According to reports, senior members of the royal household debated how to respond, bound by centuries of restraint, unsure how to face a grief so public, so overwhelming. Diana's death exposed a quiet conflict between tradition and humanity, between duty and emotion. And for the first time in generations, the crown would be forced to choose between them. In the days that followed, grief swept across Britain like a tide the crown could not control. Outside Kensington Palace, the sea of flowers grew higher than the gates themselves. People from every corner of the world arrived not as subjects, but as mourners, united by loss. The silence of Buckingham Palace became louder than words. For days, the flag above it remained still, unmoved, a symbol of tradition that suddenly felt out of step with a nation's heartbreak. It was the people, not the institution, who gave Diana her final crown, one made of love, not lineage. When Queen Elizabeth finally addressed the nation, her voice trembled not from weakness, but from history bending beneath emotion. For the first time, the monarchy faced the truth Diana had embodied all along, that compassion, honesty, and vulnerability could be as powerful as any royal decree. Prince Charles, often misunderstood in his relationship with her, was said to be shaken to the core. Reports described his quiet return from Paris, a man burdened by guilt, reflection, and perhaps a realization that love, once lost, cannot be rewritten. William and Harry, still only boys, walked behind their mother's coffin as millions watched in silence. That single image, two sons following their mother's final journey, would become one of the most haunting in modern royal history. But beyond the grief, something began to change. The monarchy, once distant and untouchable, started to feel the pull of modern empathy. Diana's influence, once seen as a threat, became the very lesson the institution could no longer ignore. Her death was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a reckoning. Because through her life and her loss, the British people discovered that humanity could live within the walls of tradition, and that even a princess could redefine what it means to be royal. In the quiet years that followed, Diana's presence never truly faded. Her image, that radiant smile, that gaze of empathy, remains etched into the soul of Britain. Even decades later, the mention of her name carries both tenderness and sorrow, as though the world is still whispering, "What if?" Through her short but luminous life, she became something no title could define. She was a royal, yes, but more importantly, she was human. She showed the world that vulnerability could coexist with grace, that compassion could challenge tradition, and that love in its purest form was stronger than protocol. In every hospital wing she opened, in every cause she championed, in every hand she held, Princess Diana left behind a legacy not carved in stone, but written in the hearts of people she touched. And though the crown remains, her spirit continues to hover above it, a silent reminder that royalty, at its truest, begins with humanity. As the years pass, her sons carry her memory not as a shadow of tragedy, but as a light that guides their own paths. The monarchy she once challenged now exists within a world she helped reshape, one where emotion, openness, and empathy have become part of the royal language. Because in the end, Diana did find freedom. Not in escape, but in legacy. Not in life's final moments, but in the love that outlived them. If you found this story moving, remember to like, share, and subscribe to Royal Vault UK, your window into the hidden truths, lost legacies, and untold emotions behind the crown.